block out too much. So the Revised Center, what we really model, what we believe we want to model for the field is how folks want to walk the equity walk in informal STEM. And so the Revised Center, after a very spirited debate about what the name of the center will be, we settled on Reimagining Equity and Values in Informal STEM Education. And so, let's see. And so before I begin, I think a very simple question for everyone is, do we all have what we need to access this meeting? And so this was a question that I asked of our team when we just finished our retreat, which happened over the last week. And even a simple question as this can think about, does everyone have their pencils? Does everyone have their coffee in hand, if that's what you feel you need to be successful? Does everyone have a comfortable seat? And it's really about recognizing that each of you have come here and have chosen to come here, and you have moved aside things so that you could be here for this conversation. And so we never want to underestimate those, I don't want to say barriers, but to some extent, those obstacles that you have taken or overcome just to be here and sitting in your seat. So it's always important to say, do you have what you need, whether that's interpretive services or whether or not that is simply just being in your space, like in your space. So I can't necessarily see everyone. There might be a thumbs up there. So that's great to move on. And so really just a very quick overview of this presentation and just an overview of what we'll talk about. So just the center functions, a little bit about who our team is, where we're grounded in terms of our frameworks, and then some of the strands of work that we are currently working on right now, and some of the small details about those things. And then this question that we want to always ask ourselves is, what does it mean to do equity work in informal STEM education spaces? And then, of course, question and answers about anything that we are doing, or just thoughts that we might have about equity. So this is a small video that tells you
Welcome to the Revised Center. We are an equity resource center for the National Science Foundation's Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program. REVISE stands for Reimagining Equity and Values in Informal STEM Education. We are passionate about cultivating and advancing equity in STEM, and our efforts are guided by 4 key functions.
Our plan is to co-create communities of practice with individuals and organizations. And we feel like it's very important to create counter spaces where people who have been excluded feel very safe to come in and have conversations. We want everyone to participate in this. This is not about what the Revised Center can do, but what we can do together.
We would also create spaces where people can step back from the roles they play in institutions, in the research field, and do some reflection, and from the conversations we have or the tools we share, people can take what is going to help them become more equitable in their practices.
The Revised Center seeks to amplify the visibility and impact of equity-focused research, evaluation, and practice in the ISE field and its contributions to the overall STEM endeavor. To this end, we are thinking as a center how we prioritize accessibility and inclusivity through intentional design and how we are reaching historically excluded groups. For example, we implement alt text in our website imagery, and we have leveraged live and closed captioning as well as ASL interpretation for webinars. We prioritize accessibility as we continue to develop resources for the field.
We support ASL PIs, prospective PIs, and partners in enacting their commitments to equity in research and practice. One way the Revised Center does this is through the ISE Equity Visionary Series. This center programming is a combination of webinars, workshops, and trainings to help community-based organizations and ISE leverage their experiences, build capacity to conduct equitable research, and share and learn equitable practices.
Through the Equity Project Spotlight, an online blog series on informalscience.org, we showcase diverse stories and perspectives within the ISE field that center equity. These blogs highlight strategies and success stories in implementing equitable and inclusive practices in programs, exhibits, and experiences within informal science education settings. We hope that showcasing AZLE equity-focused projects will inspire similar projects from community and grassroots organizations to seek AZLE funding.
So thank you for watching that. Purposely, I wore the same shirt so that you could actually think that I was doing this like live. Again, we are funded through the National Science Foundation and through the Advancing Informal STEM Learning program. And so we want to always acknowledge their presence and their funding. And just to reiterate what our core functions are, it is to promote equitable practices that support the AZLE program and intentionally disrupt patterns of inequity across the ISE field, which is very important because I think it means that we are naming the fact that there is inequity. And there are a lot of spaces where there's still a fight of whether or not there actually is inequity. And so that's one of the things that we intentionally love to place as one of our core functions. Second is to cultivate a multi-sector, diverse community dedicated to promoting equity in ISE experiences and environments, raising the visibility and impact of equity-focused research and practice in our field, and then, of course, support for AZLE PIs, principal investigators, prospective principal investigators, and their partners in enacting the commitments with equity with respect to their research, to their practice, and to evaluation. And so, again, we are interesting to know about our team is that because this is a virtual center, it is not a brick and mortar center, we are geographically spread out across the United States. I myself am on the East Coast, but several of our members are on the West Coast. And I'm serving as our Director of Vision and Accountability. Lisette and I are employees of Turk, which is the host institution. But we have two subawards as part of our cooperative agreement with the NSF, and Diane Miller, who is also our co-PI, comes to us from the Detroit Zoological Society, and Pati Ruiz is a director, I think a newly promoted senior director of education technology and I think emerging technologies as well at Digital Promise. And then, of course, I have to thank Yvel Gontan, our center manager, who is in the audience today, as well as Kelly Paulson, Sana Karem, and Selene Gonzalez Carrillo, and Valeria Alderete. And so we are excited about our team just as an identity, and even more excited that we just got the opportunity for the first time to have, after over 19 months in this grant, to time together to actually strategically plan and vision for what we want to do. So there's been a lot of work over the past couple of years, just hitting the ground running. And so the fact that we were able to step back and breathe is good for us. And to tell you about how we are grounded as a center and the work that we're doing in providing resources to the field and doing community connection and amplification really comes out of critical race theory, which is undergirded by a lot of intersectionality and Black feminist theory as well. We are also grounded in disability critical race studies, or DisCrit, and also undergirded by disability justice principles. And so there are a lot of words there in terms of the framework. It is we've always talked about one of the barriers for folks to understand what we do is really because there's a lot of academic theory and a lot of academic jargon that goes behind this. So what does this really mean? It means that many of these theories, if not all of these theories, espouse a recognition of the wholeness that people bring to the work. Their lived experiences, their unique perspectives are not only tolerated in the sense that how we talk about diversity, but they're welcomed and they're included. Second, we always strive to achieve access intimacy and understanding this notion of independence. And so access intimacy, for those who are not familiar, is really championed by the Mia Mingus, who talks about access intimacy from a perspective of being a disabled individual, and really thinks about that time when you could walk into any space and you feel like someone gets you. And what I mean by that is they understand almost intuitively what your needs might be. So understanding that I might need interpretation, or thinking about that prior, or just if you've ever been in a relationship where someone where their mere presence sort of relaxes you because you are able to understand, because you believe that then a person is going to always do what it takes to make you feel comfortable, as comfortable as possible in all spaces. And so access intimacy is something that it's not something we can per se achieve all the time, but it is something that as an equity resource center, we want to make sure that we are striving for that. And so a simple example could be not just the alternative text, but seeing how we can translate long PDF resources into more digestible pieces. It is one thing to have a 600-page document or a toolkit that's telling you how to advance equity, but it's another thing to be able to digest that in pieces and understand how do you search that? What makes it valuable for your experience? And then, of course, we also always aspire to promote leadership, particularly from the most marginalized. We have noted that the experience, particularly for people of the global majority, or in the U.S., we will say minoritized communities, have not been at the center of a lot of discussions. And so what we do is we advocate for thinking about how leadership should be run. So thinking about, we say people of color, how people of color are in leadership positions, on grants, and also disrupting and challenging the norms. And so thinking about who is at the table, who is a vital part of the conversation, who is at the centerpiece of that, and how those conversations and plans take place. And then thinking about how do we sustain this, not just at the individual level of projects, but then how are we thinking about propagating change across cultural institutions and then across a system? And so we talk about some of the relationships that we develop with other National Science Foundation centers, such as Stellar and Cadre, and really thinking about what are the overlapping and intersecting initiatives that we want to carry out together. And then, of course, none of this is possible without co-creation and co-design. And these theoretical frameworks really call for that. Really thinking about everyone coming in on an equal playing field, and everyone's experience being valued, and that it's incorporated into the design process from inception. So we always ask this question of what does it really mean, though, to do equity in informal STEM education spaces? And the difficult part about this is that equity means so many different things to so many different people and to so many different groups of people. And so we always want to call attention that equity exists in the outgoing, or I would say the public facing broad initiatives that we create, and also the really small things that we do. So there's also a piece that we have to embrace as a center, that it's not just about creating spaces that we believe are equitable or that we're vetting as equitable with the community, but also that we are, as a center, modeling that and showing transparency about how we are conducting ourselves as a center. So some of the ongoing strands of work that we have currently that I think address this, and I'll list some examples of only a few examples of some of the ways in which we are embodying this as a center. So the first, we have our what we call our PI and co-PI vision and business meetings that we do weekly. And this is an opportunity for us to talk about issues that affect the cooperative agreement, like for all of us, for all the PIs, and so for all of us, how it affects our individual strands of work. What does it mean to develop a relationship with our program officers? I have to say, as a person who is in his first role as a principal investigator, understanding how you have to navigate a relationship with a government entity, particularly, not that NSF isn't supportive of this, but there is a tension that does exist between a hierarchical structure and funding a center that is dedicated to equity, whose sole purpose is really to challenge norms and to think about power dynamics in a very critical way. So developing that program officer relationship is something that we talk about regularly, but also developing our mission, our vision, our values, and thinking about evaluation, how we want to evaluate impact of the center, as distinguished from the language in our solicitation, which calls for individual projects to talk more openly about what's the equity thread in their process. And so really wanting to evaluate what's the impact of what we are doing. Also, we have created an ISE equity framework that is continuing to evolve. So from year one, or from the proposal stage all the way till now, what we do is we survey the field. We send out our equity framework to the field. We co-develop it with our advisors. And then once it's sent out to the field, we receive feedback from the field so that we're aware of what are the concepts, what are the blind spots that we're missing in equity? Like, what are the things that we haven't considered? And so this way, the field is coming along together and evolving in its understanding of how we not define equity or put a box around it, but how we're choosing to frame it moving forward. And then operationally, I think we demonstrate this as a team through horizontality. And what we mean by that is simply the way that we operate, even though we have titles that speak to our accountability, the way that we really work is through shared power and really through shared consensus decision making and having a process and a rubric for that. And those are the things that we are going to publish now that we've had our retreats or articulate some of these things. Those are things we're going to be transparent about and putting those things out on our website so that folks can see this is the process that we use for our mission. This is the process we use to develop our vision. This is the process that we use to run our meetings. This is the process that we might use to discern how we collaborate with institutions, because it really is about developing trust and transparency, and then, of course, walking that walk. Second is our communications and branding strand, and really Valeria, like Alderete, and I think also in combination with Sana, unlike Karam, have done a fantastic job of really amplifying the voice of the center and also the voice of informal STEM education researchers, any practitioners, and evaluators. So you heard in the video around our equity spotlight series. So really focusing on folks that are in the field and really highlighting the great work that they are doing. Also having a social media presence and documenting this at every stage so that folks can think about how they want to amplify the work of their practitioners and also folks that they're collaborating with. And I mentioned the collaboration guidelines to really just be transparent about how we are working and providing technical assistance to folks. And then, of course, our ISE Equity Visionary Series, building capacity for equity. and thinking about how folks are preparing for proposal development. So this is done in collaboration with the National Science Foundation. Thinking about like the National Science Foundation does do webinar series around how to prepare for federal awards, but there's a whole host of conversations that have to happen, particularly for community-based organizations. Like, do they even have the infrastructure to think about a federal grant? If they're thinking about running it themselves, is there even alignment with federal grant dollars and what the mission of their organization is? And then how are they developing equitable relationships with other institutions, particularly academic institutions, which do have a lot of research infrastructure, but that also means that they have a lot of power and how they can determine what happens to those research dollars. And too often, community-based organizations in particular are sort of, shall we say, left out in the cold a little bit with really thinking about how like where their impact and where their involvement is. Do they have access to their own, like access to data, those types of questions? And so this series is a series of conversations and webinars that helps organizations speak to that, assess that for themselves, and then decide how to best move forward. And then it also helps, like, I think more what we call tier 1 or R1 institutions, really thinking about how are you establishing equitable relationships with those practitioners. And an example of this, a session that we have coming up is at the end of April. So Tara Robillard of Turk will be hosting a seminar on IRB basics. And I think this will also include somewhat of an offshoot conversation around culturally responsive evaluation for informal STEM education projects as well.
Stephen, just a word to say that we have like 3-4 minutes at the maximum
Sure.
before going into the breakout room. Thank you.
Perfect. Yep. And that's perfect. Our next initiative is our digital infrastructure and website. So we do maintain informalscience.org, which hosts the repository for informal STEM education research and evaluation and practitioner projects. We have also procured a EBSCO subscription, so that is free access for the field to journals, academic journals, and we have just increased that library to include journals that focus on equity and equitable practices to help inform the field, and so that the field has a lot of theory at its back. And last, our communities of practice threads, even something as simple as even changing the acronym. We understand that inviting communities into a marginalized community, especially in the United States, saying the acronym COP, spelling COP, is actually a very interesting thing to think about. And so we even intentionally calling it CPs as an acronym to avoid that. In the spring of this year, we will be piloting our first interest group, which we believe will evolve into a community of practice, which focuses on building equitable relationships and what are the processes and supports that folks want to engage in that. And of course, our AZL awardee meeting that we had in December, we have posted all of our agendas, our sessions, notes from those things, as well as our team reflections. And just a brief summary of the awardee meeting. Again, those things that we posted online, I think, include our conference schedule, our conference sessions, our non-land acknowledgement, and I'd be glad to go into that for folks who are interested. But really, it is just addressing the idea that land acknowledgement for and in support of indigenous cultures in the United States often can seem performative. And so really thinking about as a resource center, are we prepared to do that without understanding what's the work we need to do on the backside for reparation? And so that, again, our code of conduct and norms has been requested from the field, like to actually utilize in their own projects and their own practices. So another example of modeling and sharing those pieces. And then, of course, team reflections and, of course, attendee spotlights are all available via our social media as well. This is actually an example of one of the sessions where it just shows what is your role in the disruption of a system that is not challenging norms? And so really speaking about everyone playing a very important and dynamic role in addressing equity, that it can't necessarily just be about a resource center. Like Diane said on the video, it is not about us as a center advancing or changing equity, but it's about us changing the field together. And of course, please do connect with us. Please join our social media. We do keep that very much up to date. It is active. Please visit informalscience.org. I did neglect to mention that we are moving to a WordPress platform to develop a completely new website that it is more accessible. And so that will be unveiled in May of this year. So please look forward to that. And of course, I just want to thank everyone for the time, the presence, and the energy. I certainly want to thank our team, their advisory board, the Canizales group who facilitated our retreat, one day of our retreat in the past week, and of course our program officers, Ellen McCauley and Lynn Tran. And so, thank you all. And that's a different presentation.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for your presentation. It was so interesting. A lot of different ideas and all these experiences you shared with us. It's very powerful. So thank you very much. I think we have time for one, maybe two questions, if there is any. I'm happy to leave the floor. Yes, Piotr.
On mute. Can I ask a question? Thanks for excellent presentation, Stephen. I'm asking you about something you only touched on, but it actually goes to the heart of all this work. You referred in your presentation that this is about developing trust and transparency. And in the original icebreaker at the beginning, you wrote equity moves at the speed of trust, which Alexia pointed out. I think the question I have, which has been bothering me a lot recently, is, well, trust in what? What are we asking communities to trust the organization with? Trust is a big thing, and I think I'm getting increasingly irritated with people just saying, oh, we're developing trust, because actually we're not. We're developing trust in something very specific. And I think one of the things we need to be a bit more transparent about, and this is my question really, is the nature and extent of trust. What should they trust the organization with? To listen, to ensure respectful dialogue, to make sure we're not box ticking, to ensure that we're in it for the long term and things like that. It isn't just trust, it's trust in something very specific. And I think we need to shift the nature of the discussion to be a bit more specific, drill down into, well, what do we mean by trust? What do you think?
And just, you have no more than 2 minutes to answer.
Sure. And that's a wonderful question. And I think the drill down piece is depending upon you being transparent about what even started your relationship, what prompted you to reach out. And I think that's first the transparency piece. And I think then you can start to get more specific with, I'm trying to develop trust if we're just talking about working with a group because you want them as a partner on a research project. You can talk to them about, that's specifically why I reached out. That was my intention. Now, with that comes, to your point, I think, varying layers of trust. That means I might need to think about who are the respected individuals in your community, or how do you all make decisions? I have to build trust to feel like I acknowledge I am an outsider. So you have to trust me enough, or I want to build trust for you to allow me to come into your community. I want you to trust me to be able to have great intention, even that, like in a lot of norms we say assume best intentions, but no, I need to build that trust that even allows for you to think that I'm coming in with good intentions. I need you to trust that the scope of the relationship, either you're being transparent with what the scope of the relationship will be, or that you're talking about creating a lasting relationship. I mean, beyond the scope of your grant dollars. And so I think I think to your point, it's like it's everything. Like as much as it's hard to drill down, it is everything at every step. Like there's a trust to engage. Like, I'm also looking in the chat too. Yes. So I think also that's part of it too. It's coming with an asset-based approach. And like also like coming at it with like building trust means that I'm recognizing your lived experience, and also that like I'm coming to you. So there's something that is valuable that's there that I'm not learning. And so I need you to trust that I'm not going to like engage with you within an extraction or extractivist mindset, essentially. So that's the best I can answer it for now.
Yeah, but thank you, because we run out of time. I'm really sorry,